It's 3 a.m. in the morning. So let me share my screen. Yes, so yeah, this is my current research on the idea of humanizing technology, basically, and right now I'm focusing on humanizing online learning and a lesson learned that I have experienced for the last 2 years with COVID-19. So technically, my speaking has quite a lot in common with previous doctoral Timmy. So I experienced firsthand the struggle of the shift teaching from in-person to online. And that was not easy, even for me as someone that I used to call quite technology savvy, but unfortunately, it's also kind of hard, and especially my student as well. So this research is a team research, me and two other colleagues in Indonesia. So let me present this a little bit. Yeah, a little bit about me. I'm first year doctoral student in teacher education and school improvement here in UMass Amherst. Some research interest in humanizing education. That's something that currently we are promoting in Indonesia, especially sort of an approach in classroom practices to be more humanized. And recently we tried to move it online because we were sort of moving teaching online due to COVID-19. So that's the current research at the moment. So a little bit about the background research. As Dr. Timmy said, COVID-19 is definitely the major turning point, especially in the importance of investment, technology investment in education. We were shocked, and and we sort of struggled how to teach online or remotely, and it's not easy, especially for developing countries like Indonesia, where technology access quite limited, and students also never been online, so that's make the whole thing sort of adds to the complexities of teaching remotely. When we had to move teaching online, the thing that I had on my mind was, how can I maintain this personal and professional connection with my students? Because normally in the classroom where I sort of practice the sort of personal connection with my students, and that what makes my classroom more intimate. But when online, I had no idea how that's going to be because it's over technology and student is somewhere around places, not in front of me. So that's something that I sort of have on my mind when I had to move online. And then most of my students as well never been to learning online before, and that's obviously to make that habit is really hard as well. So we created some pedagogical practices, or I call it as initiatives, to establish such a connection online in our course design. The course design is basically, we have evaluated this like 4 times. So the one that I presented now is, let's say, the latest version of the design. And so we'd like to share our experience in the design, in our online learning design based on the learner's evaluation as well. So I'm going to present the data in sort of like a house. I think that's something like everyone knows, definitely. So just to make it easy to understand what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna ask you probably to imagine like you have to visit a house and nobody in that house, but then you are required to interact and engage. So what would you feel in that situation? There would be obviously a lot of factors going on, a lot of feeling as well. Maybe you will feel anxious, or maybe some of you feel happy with the new house, even though you're gonna meet with strangers, for example, or maybe you feel not ready. So there are gonna be so many feelings depending on your personalities, for example, and depending also on the other factors. Many factors can influence this kind of readiness, for example. So this is the assumption that we had when we move online. So because our learners are basically pre-service English teachers in the public university in West Java, Indonesia, and most or if not all never been online anyway. And then they are sort of middle to low socioeconomic status. And obviously because they live in towns, rural areas, they've got a lack of access to computers and internet connections. So it was really tough to move online. So based on this assumption, we designed an online learning that hopefully facilitate this sort of framework that we use. So we tried to find on literature what's going on and how to teach online. So we found this COI framework, one of the most extensive frameworks to use for online learning. So it's kind of helpful in how we sort of design this online learning thing. But again, maybe there is something, at the present, maybe we miss, because I think like there's something like still missing in there. How about the feelings and emotions? How to know if my students are okay, how to know if my students learn, and those things that sort of non-existent or not really, easy to find out when you teach online. Because again, there's so many things going on and not in front of me, so that's really hard to guess as well. So our design is basically, we call it sort of blended, but still online. Okay, some people call it bichronous. Okay, so we combine between asynchronous and synchronous. Because we learn from experience that asynchronous only is not effective because students think that it text-based, boring, and make them isolated and lonely. And synchronous only is not effective either because, is Zoom fatigue or hangover, and also because most students are living in rural areas. So they don't only have good internet connection to have Zoom meetings like for hours, obviously. So we try to sort of design this, let's say, house, okay, or course design. And hopefully it will be helpful to people that, teaching online in a similar context like me and in developing countries, or even in online learning in general, because the issue of, social presence or being lonely and isolated is still an issue in online learning in general that impact the course retention and online learning in general. And initiative is basically pedagogical practices and curricular consideration to support the learning. So it's like kind of all the things that we put into that design, okay? And we want to know what students think about that. So by the end of the semester, we asked the participant to evaluate the overall experience of visiting the house or the course design. Why we ask perception? Well, basically they are the users in this case, right? They're the user of the technology that we use in the classroom. And of course, we always try to avoid sort of, teacher voice hegemony, like something like always from our perspective. But we want to know what students think about this. And that's, to me especially, is very important to know if the learning is effective. So the design is sequential explanatory. So we conducted the survey first, and then we analyzed the data, and after that we use the data for the semi-structured interview. So the interview is basically to follow up the what's going on in the survey, because survey obviously doesn't explain well in terms of the depth of the information. So we found out through the interview. And these are the research questions that we ask, the overall perception of the course design and delivery, and in what ways does the course design facilitate cognitive, teaching, and social emotional presence. So these are the findings. Obviously, this is like another summary of the finding. It looks kind of very positive, but obviously there are some nuances as well that I'm going to explain one by one in the next slides. So the survey results is quite positive, like mostly, participants perceive all the initiatives that we conducted, strongly agree, and strongly agree and strongly agree. So that's sort of quite positive outcomes of what we have done in our course, basically. So the overall perception of the design is that students think that the design is academically still stimulating, but still socially engaging. So what are those mean? Okay. So basically, academic simulating is like, and how they actually perceive this whole experience of visiting the house, as I explained before, including the construction and the activities, and also the effectiveness and the initiative that they receive. So academically stimulating is something that they think the course make them learn according to perception because of its well-structured and a lot of content variety as well. Meanwhile, socially engaging is defined as something that students perceive the online learning to be meaningfully facilitated, like in terms of interaction, because there are many kind of forums, like light and heavy topics. So we do not rely on the heavy topics. There's a lot of light topics as well, and students like that. And there's some enjoyment and comfort as well. So I'm going to explain in detail in the next slides. A little bit about the delivery. Apparently, the combination between LMS and video conferencing quite ideal according to the perception, because it gives them a time to work individually, academically prepared, and also some students think that it's sort of fun. So because we start with this LMS first, so we use LMS Canvas, and then after that we follow with Zoom. So for example, like 1 hour on Canvas, they can do any time within a week. And then after that, around 1 hour on Zoom, because again, we conducted like 2 hours Zoom meeting. I was not effective. Shouldn't feel like that's not effective. So we limited the time on Zoom meeting only 40 to 1 hour. So it's only for discussion because they've already learned the materials beforehand on LMS Canvas. Now, this is something like what students think about the first time they enter the course. Okay, they appreciate the idea that we as the hosts or the instructors welcome and guide them, because we used to think that our students are quite technology savvy because they say, Generation Z, for example, they live with technology every day, but the assumption is wrong, because even though we assume they must be capable of doing technology, but turn out a lot of students cannot do that. So sufficient guidance before the course started is very important. So in this case, students appreciate the idea that they are guided how to use the LMS, for example, like how to use Canvas, how to use Zoom meeting, and all how to interact online. Those kind of things are very important that we have to do in the beginning. And that's what we found out in our study, basically. And then now this is an interesting part, because apparently the way we design the materials, or the cognitive present, they perceive it to be like kind of healthy meals. Because again, like since we use the data as a house, obviously when you visit a house, the host will present you with some food, for example, and so what do they think about the food, basically? So they think that the food or their learning activities quite healthy, because especially we designed it like kind of 5-course meal. So we always start the activity with something quite light, okay, or like an appetizer. And then we also have intermezzo. This is very famous for students, like kind of for fun activities in the middle of the course. And then the main course, that's like the materials. And then we also have this review quizzes, Q&A, and we put that into our course design. And students perceive this really positive. So that's something like probably
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
Sorry?
5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. I use my timer as well. So in the social presence, it's sort of they appreciate that we did sort of a lot of ways of communication. It's not only one way, but there are many topics as well, like kind of light and heavy topics, and that's what they appreciate. So warm up is what they appreciate the most, because in warm up we always share sort of light topics like hobbies and all stuff like that. So, but maybe there's something else going on, because maybe that looks all positive, but yeah, so we also try to find a well-accepted initiative. So this is like kind of activities that they like the most. So obviously warm-up, discussion, intermezzo, like kind of, in the middle, it's quite popular for the student. But also we found that some of those popular activities were also less accepted initiatives by some of the students. For example, like quiz, this is number one, like not very popular, because apparently when they take the quiz online, sometimes they say that we open the course maybe on the way, and then when we see the quiz, we feel like kind of depressing, something like that. Or when they see score immediately after they take the quiz and the score is low, it also affects their mood, something like that. So that's why like kind of some students perceive the quiz not really high. But again, I guess that's something like we can work on, like kind of how to present the quiz more in a more interesting way. So I got to go to lesson learned right now. So the lesson learned from my research is that participants value highly an online course a combination between synchronous and asynchronous, I think. And here we use LMS Canvas and Zoom video conferencing. And then it's welcoming and guiding. Okay, so these are some activities that we can do in the beginning of the course. Okay, if necessary, we can do pre-course tutorial to the students, give them welcome message, and then have some orientation as well, like, you know, like kind of in class, in person, basically. And don't forget that since online, you need to have also tech support all the time, so they know when something going on with the technology, they know where to go, where to ask the questions. And then provides healthy meals. Okay, in terms of the learning materials, try to present it in a light, heavy, and light way. You know, like when you enjoy food. Okay, you obviously don't start with something really heavy, like big. You start with something light, and student like that as well. And then interaction as well. Try to make them free, but sort of respectful, and then a lot of making connection and also try to incorporate various discussion forums, not only just one, but there are many, okay, many kind of forums with, you know, light and heavy topics as well. But what most important is that to do all of this, to achieve that kind of personal connection, is we come up with the idea of humanizing, which is the ability to of the course design and delivery to evoke learners' affection, so that learning over technology can be perceived as real, because this is still a mindset in Indonesia, especially that learning online is not effective, it's not reliable, it's not credible. So we want to try to change that kind of mindset by making how to make it like sort of real, like kind of in person, but over technology. So the key is by, you know, replacing the physical distance, obviously because we are far away, and we change that into psychological connection through initiative and means that we can use digitally, such as memes, tips, motivational quotes. So these all kind of small stuff, but obviously this sort of very influencing in student. They like this kind of thing. They like relaxing music before Zoom meeting, for example. I'm gonna show you a little bit example if I still have more time. Yeah, this is what students think about those kind of little thing. Apparently, it means a lot to them. So these are like an example of how we present the materials, a lot of pictures, a lot of memes, and this 5 minute break is very important on Zoom. They love the idea of having break in the middle of Zoom meeting. And then these are like kind of pollings that we ask normally before Zoom meetings, sometimes about their feelings, sometimes about like, you know, something like, who found this week's module confusing, for example. And students like that, they feel that they feel welcome before the Zoom meeting rather than just waiting, you know, on the screen. So like have that kind of interaction before Zoom meeting. And this is the language that we use. So we use first person perspective because we want to make it sort of more intimate. So we try to use the language that casual, like kind of student that use all the time. So we feel that kind of close with our student rather than like using too formal language. So this kind of small thing, like the way we use language, it also gives some impacts on how students perceive online learning. And this is how we design, okay, the orientation and all on our Canvas and our LMS. And this is how typically we design the weekly module. So you see, we start with warm up, and then we've got this intermezzo, like it can be games, it can be listening song, watching funny videos, and then they can continue with the materials. And then at the end, there will be like some quizzes as well. So we try to find that, and students really appreciate this as well. So what is the conclusion? Well, basically, for now, technology is just a tool, okay? And our findings basically agrees to the previous findings that in order for it to be sort of humanized, it needs to be cultured and facilitated. So technology cannot just miraculously make connection, but we need to facilitate that so that it can be the extension of humanity. So which is, I put some quote in this that probably is true. Distance is not a problem, but communication is. But meaningful communication, of course. So maybe learning online is not a problem with the distance, but maybe in how we communicate with our students. So yeah, that's it in my presentation. So I always put this idea. And if you want to connect, this is our effort, Humanizing Education, that we put on Instagram as well. So I hope it's useful. Thank you so much.